Hello there! This video will show you how to use Microsoft Excel to complete your fourth Excel assignment, which includes correlation and regression, and an extra credit for partial correlation that I'll let you figure out on your own. So let's take a look at the assignment. This is an example from industrial organizational psychology that's based on selection tests. So a lot of times before a company will implement a selection test as a criteria for selecting employees, they'll test it out with current employees to make sure that the selection test actually predicts performance. So that's what this example is based on. Let's say that the human resources manager for Dunder Mifflin wants to see if this new sales ability test should be used as selection criteria for new employees. And to figure that out, they want to see if the sales ability test score is related to sales, or in this case, reams of paper sold. And if it is, then they may consider using it as a hiring test or a selection test because they think that those, for instance, who score higher on the sales ability test score will tend to sell more paper. So if they don't score as well on the sales ability test score, you wouldn't be inclined to hire them if that test score was predictive of sales. So let's go ahead and use Microsoft Excel to do a correlation analysis looking at the relationship between the sales ability test scores and reams of paper sold for this sample of 15 current sales employees. So just click right up here in the top left corner where you see the little four-cornered or four-sided arrow pop up. Click it to highlight all your data. Hit Control C to copy. Then go in your Excel worksheet, click on cell 1A, and hit Control V to paste. And I'm going to go ahead and size these. Oh, I don't like that. I'm going to click and drag it. There we go. That looks better to me. Okay. Now, just in case you don't already have the data analysis tab installed on the computer that you're working with, go ahead and click on the File tab if you don't have the data analysis option. Go down to Options, and you've done this before. Select Add-ins. Go to Analysis Tool Pack, select Go, make sure Analysis Tool Pack is checked, and then click OK. And then when you click the Data tab, you'll have the Data Analysis option right there. Okay, so if you look at the assignment, before we jump into a correlation analysis, you need to construct a scatter plot. And then you're going to look at that scatter plot and explain, based on the form of the scatter plot, what do you think the strength and direction of this relationship is? So let's go ahead and go into Excel and create a scatter plot. So go to highlight your data, then click on the Insert tab, and then you'll see this little picture of a scatter plot right there. So you'll click that. You can also do this down here. When you highlight your data, you'll see a little option appear down here. You can click on that, go to Charts, and then select Scatter. Or you can highlight your data, click the Insert tab up here, hit the little scatter icon under Charts, click Scatter. Now we want to format this graph. So let's go ahead and get rid of the reams of paper sold title. Just click on that and hit Delete on your keyboard. And then let's make sure that we have the table selected, or the scatter plot selected. Chart Tools is popped up, and we're on the Design tab. Go over to Add Chart Element. Go to Axis Titles. Let's do Primary Horizontal. Add Chart Element, Axis Titles, Primary Vertical. And let's go ahead and get rid of these grid lines here. So under Add Chart Element, go to Grid Lines, and get rid of Primary Major Horizontal. Go to Add Chart Element again, go to Grid Lines, and then unclick Primary Major Vertical. So just click on that. And now we don't have all those lines. Now we want to label our axes. So click that and then highlight it. This represents the sales ability test scores. So sales ability test score. And then the y-axis, right, the x-axis represents the x variable, which is our pseudo-independent variable here, right? We are assuming that it's their sales ability test score that is predicting the reams of paper sold. So our pseudo-dependent variable goes on our y-axis. Reams of paper sold. And now we have a nice, pretty scatter diagram or scatter plot. Now, if you want to get fancy, you can change the colors of this. It really just changes the colors of your dots. That's up to you. So let's go ahead and put this into our worksheet or into our assignment. So left click on it, hit Control C to copy. And then let's go ahead and paste as a picture in our Microsoft Word document. So you'll go to the Home tab, click on the arrow below Paste, go to Paste Special, and let's go ahead and paste it as a JPEG. Now we can size it and the formatting doesn't get all crazy on us. So there it is. That's your scatter plot. Now I want you to look at this scatter plot and answer the questions for part B. What do you think is the strength and direction of the relationship? And then explain based on the form that you see here, based on the pattern of results. So is there an upward or downward slope? Do the data tend to be more linear or less linear, or more close to fitting a straight line or more spread out? Those types of things are what I want to know in your explanation. Then part C, you're going to use Excel to calculate the correlation coefficient for this relationship between the sales ability test scores and reams of paper sold. So let's go ahead and go to the Data tab, and then let's look at the Data Analysis option. And we are going to select Correlation and then click OK. So Data tab, Data Analysis, select Correlation, it's towards the top of the list, and then click OK. Now we want to put our input range. So make sure that the cursor is flashing right here in this little box. Then we're going to highlight all of our data, including the labels. And then we're going to click Labels in first row. Make sure Grouped by Columns is selected. And then let's go ahead and put this in a new worksheet, and let's call it Correlation. And then let's click OK. And now we have our correlation table. And I'm going to go ahead and fix the width of these columns so that it fits the entire contents of what's in it. So you'll just double click in between each column when you see that little double-sided arrow. Highlight this this table, hit Control C to copy. We've got the happy dancing line. And then right here, let's go ahead and paste this as a picture. You could also just select this to paste it as a picture, whichever way you want to do it. Now we've got part C complete. Now for part D, you are going to report the correlation coefficient, which is this guy right here. So think about it. Of course, the relationship between sales ability test scores and sales ability test scores is 1, right? Because you're correlating the same variable with itself. And of course, the relationship between reams of paper sold and reams of paper sold is 1, because again, you're correlating the same exact thing with the same exact thing. It's pretty darn consistent because it's the same exact values for both X and Y, if that was what we were looking at. Here is the correlation between reams of paper sold and sales ability test scores. Now, you can run the correlation analysis for multiple variables at once. So I'm going to digress for a minute. If we're looking at the extra credit, we've added another variable here, extroversion. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put it in a new sheet. Control V to paste it. I'm going to scooch these out a little bit. So we can run a correlation analysis for tons of variables all at one time. So I'll show you. I'll highlight this, Data tab, click on Data Analysis, Correlation, click OK. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight all 3 variables, grouped by columns, labels in first row. I'm going to go ahead and click Output Range, click here, and place this table right in the same worksheet. And click OK. Check this out. You've got the correlation between reams of paper sold and sales ability test scores right there. The correlation between extroversion and sales ability test scores right there. See, you're just looking where the two meet. And then the correlation between extroversion and reams of paper sold right there. So you can use those to help you answer the extra credit questions. I just wanted to show you that you can do correlations between two variables, but you can look at a bunch of variables at once. So this is a correlation between two variables, this is a correlation between two variables, and this is a correlation between two variables, but you can do a bunch at the same time. All right, let's go back to our correlation table here. And making sure that I pasted it into the assignment. Yep, there it is. Okay, we're good to go. So you need to actually find our crit based on the degrees of freedom for this data and the fact that we are wanting to see if there is a significant, and let me just go ahead and add, positive relationship. So we are expecting that those who score higher on the sales ability test will sell more paper. So I just want to be more specific there. And I already told you we are assuming a one-tailed test with an alpha level of 0.05. So you need to find our crit, compare it to this to determine if it's significant, and then tell me what this is. I mean, that's right there is that answer. The relationship between x and y, or the correlation coefficient between x and y. And then tell me the strength and direction based on this coefficient. Now, if this is somewhat different from the conclusion you had up here, I'm okay with that as long as your explanation here jives with your strength and direction that you predicted. Then you're going to write the conclusion of the correlation analysis in APA style. I give you guidelines and an example on the first page. And there's also guidelines and an example in the textbook, and I reference which pages you can find that. So now we know that we have a significant correlation. I just go ahead and tell you that this is going to be significant, but I still want to know our crit. So we have a significant correlation between sales ability test scores and reams of paper sold, but now you want to take this a step further, and you want to use those sales ability test scores to predict how many reams of paper will an employee sell in a month. So we are going to look at a regression analysis. So let's go ahead and pop into Excel, go back to our data. I'm going to go ahead and rename this data. So I'm going to right click, select rename, and I'm just going to call this data and then hit enter. Okay, so now let's do a correlation analysis. So make sure the data tab is clicked on, select data analysis, and then we're going to look for regression right there. Regression. Then click OK. Input Y, input X. Y is our dependent variable in this case. X is our independent variable. So what we think is the predictor is X, and what we're trying to predict is Y. Remember Y hat? Right? The predicted value of y. So we're going to create a regression equation trying to predict y based on x and how x is related with y. Okay, so the y range, that's going to be your dependent variable, reams of paper sold. Your x range is going to be your independent variable, sales ability test scores. Make sure that you click labels so Excel knows that the first row includes your labels. And then let's put this in a new worksheet called regression. And then go ahead and click OK. Don't worry about any of these. All right, so let's go ahead and format all of our numbers to go to the thousands place. So you'll just highlight, right click, go to Format Cells, select Number, and then round 3 decimal places. All right. I don't think you can do multiples at once. Ooh, I think you can. Sweet. So remember to highlight multiple things, right? I'd go here, then hold down the Control tab, and you can keep on highlighting. And then you can just do the right click, format cells, number, 3 decimal places, and you can do it all in one shot. Sweet. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do the double click between columns so that each column auto fits the contents within it. Okay, and this one doesn't look very good. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about these values for just a second. So, see this 0.705? Does that look familiar? Yes, it does. Now, this 0.705 is pretty much the same as a correlation coefficient because we only have one predictor in this model. So it's essentially using the relationship between salesability test scores and the reams of paper sold. Now, if we were doing multiple regression and we had multiple variables entered here, this would be very different from the correlation between any two variables. Here's R squared. So the effect size, this squared essentially, because we only have one predictor in this case. So we have a strong effect, or sorry, a large effect. This is the adjusted R squared. I'm not going to get into that. We'll just focus on the simple R squared. Here's your standard error of the estimate, which you should remember from the lecture. So on average, we think that our prediction will be off by about 115 reams of paper, which is pretty scary, actually. Okay, we have 15 observations, right? 15 employees in our data set. Now here is the analysis of regression source table. And this is the p-value. It doesn't give you an F crit. This is significance F. This is essentially the p-value in this. Then you have your F statistic here. You could find F crit if you wanted to and compare this to F crit. But I'm just going to have you interpret the significance based on this p-value right here, the significance of F. Okay, now let's look at the most important piece of this, which is going to give us the regression equation. So I'm just going to focus on these coefficients. So right here, that is your constant, your A in the regression equation. This is B in the regression equation. So the slope or the weight of the impact of X on Y. You can think about it in alphabetical order, right? A, B. Let's go ahead and copy. So highlight all this, hit Control C to copy, and then paste this guy. And I'm going to go ahead and paste it as a picture. And I'm going to go ahead and scoot this onto its own page. So I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to hold down Control and hit Enter to insert a page break. All right, write the regression equation for predicting reams of paper sold using salesability test scores. Remember, I just told you which coefficient is A and which coefficient is B. So then, based on this regression equation, what's the predicted number of reams of paper sold in a month for someone who scores 85 on the salesability test? So you will want to plug in 85 for the X in your regression equation, and then just do the math to figure out what would be the predicted ream of paper sold, or our predicted Y in this case. Now you want to know, are salesability test scores a significant predictor of reams of paper sold, and how do you know based on the p-value? And I'm just going to go ahead and say get rid of the critical value because it doesn't really give it to us, and I don't want you to have to look it up in the table. So just based on the p-value, tell me, is it significant or not, and how you know. Remember, I want you to compare this p-value to your alpha level. All right, so that's it for the required piece of the Excel assignment. But I do want you to attempt the extra credit, not only to earn extra points, but to prepare for your quiz, which will require you to do a partial correlation. And I even started the formula for you right here using the equations tool to make it easier to show your work. And then you're not only going to figure out the partial correlation coefficient, but you are going to tell me what you think about the true relationship between sales ability test scores and reams of paper sold after controlling for extroversion, that third variable that we've inserted here. And you're going to test to see if it's still significant using a critical value that you can look up in the table. And I'll give you a hint. It's the same critical value that you used up here. I'm going to go ahead and put this on a separate page as well. So I'm going to click right here and then Control Enter. All right, guys, I hope you found this very useful and that you feel like a pro in doing correlation and regression analysis in Excel.